We already know that when we take something from nature and start dividing it, a plant, an herb, a piece of fruit, an egg, and consuming it in these various ratios, that we're going to get less than optimal results because nature provides everything to us as a whole with intention for us to be taking it as a whole. And this is no different with the hemp or the cannabis plant. It was intended to be consumed as a whole. Now, real quick, the difference between the hemp and the cannabis plant. Both are the cannabis plant under the umbrella of the cannabis plant. Hemp is in closer ratio to what nature intended. The cannabis plant, however, has been bred by man to have higher THC content years and years and decades ago, when they realized that you could get high and it could give that euphoric, stoned kind of feeling. It became more reason for them to breed the plant that way. That's just what people were seeking at that point in time, and has carried on throughout the times, and now is what we typically find in dispensaries. But the hemp plant is more in alignment with what nature intended. The cannabinoids, which are different components to the hemp plant, have a more balanced ratio with the terpenes and the other flavonoids and components of the hemp plant itself. We have broken down these cannabinoids and understand now what they do in the human body and how they interact with our cells. And although our cells carry out very specialized functions, they can also not operate in isolation, which means by themselves. Same with the hemp or the cannabis plant. All of those different cannabinoids, THC, CBD, CBDA, CBC, CBG, are not meant to operate in isolation. We can study them in isolation and understand their mechanisms of action in the human body and in our pets. We can understand what they do when they are isolated, but to have the greatest effect, they need to be consumed as a whole altogether. For life or survival, we are dependent on this cellular communication within our body. This happens when one cell speaks to another through a very specific language called chemical messengers. Once the chemical message is spoken, the receiving cell hears the message through these cell receptors, and this is when a response happens. So when you consume the hemp or the cannabis plant extracts, you get a response happening. The hemp plant, like I said, has all of these different cannabinoids. CBG is one of them, and that's the one that I'm going to focus on. Like its friends, CBD, CBDA, THC, THCA, CBC. They're active compounds that interact through your endocannabinoid system, which is one of these messenger systems in the body. It's like your grand central station that allows this cell signaling communication network to happen within your body. According to what we know about the endocannabinoid system, scientists believe that many people are actually living with a clinical endocannabinoid either deficiency or dysfunction to some degree. And we know this because whenever there's some type of issue, ailment, illness, disease, we know that there's some type of dysfunction in the endocannabinoid system, because the endocannabinoid system is designed specifically to bring your body into homeostasis or balance. And when we have balance and we are in homeostasis, we don't have aches, pains, illnesses, or anything to complain about, really. What this means is that the communication within the endocannabinoid system is not very good, and homeostasis has just been lost. The ability to balance your health or good health is just gone. CBG, cannabigerol is what its scientific word is a very powerful cannabinoid that we now know of. And when used appropriately, it could actually provide assistance to the body to regain that cellular language for this to occur. The attractive component and the reason that scientists have been putting so much effort into studying CBG is that not only does it exert action at the cannabinoid receptors within the endocannabinoid system, but it's multidisciplinary and interacts with other classes of receptors. And this is what separates CBG from its counterpoints or its counterparts, CBD, THC, CBN. First, very important to note is that CBG is non-intoxicating, which means it will not make you feel high. It is, I'm not going to call it non-psychoactive because all of the components of the cannabinoids or of the cannabis or of the hemp plant, including CBD, are psychoactive. That doesn't mean they get you high. Psychoactive doesn't mean it makes you stoned. It just means that it interacts with receptors that can influence your mood. Not necessarily making you high, but can, in fact, regulate your mood. Some of the main areas of concentrated study have been on supporting healthy metabolic processes, which is my favorite, metabolic health. Metabolic function is everything. What we see from study is that only 8%, it's 7 or 8% of the entire American population has healthy metabolic function, which means 93 to 92% of the rest of the population has a dysfunctional metabolic health to some degree. Without that metabolic health, we're prone to chronic disease like diabetes, heart disease, cancer. So it's really no wonder that we have such an epidemic of cancer happening right now, amongst other reasons. Since it has the ability to help balance blood pressure, insulin resistance, and healthy fat storage, CBG has the potential to be therapeutic to manage this metabolic syndrome and prevent the onset of chronic preventable disease. Now, metabolic dysfunction is a very multifaceted syndrome. So a lot of times it needs a multifaceted approach to correct it. CBG could be used in addition to typically prescribed medications to help address this. I'm not promoting the use of pharmaceuticals, and I'm not against the use of pharmaceuticals. Everybody needs to be able to take a very holistic, integrative approach to their health and make sure that it's patient-centered when you're working with a physician or a practitioner. So that means just make sure you're working with somebody who understands your values, your beliefs, and your goals so that what you want is at the heart and center of what your treatment program or plan consists of. So there are very specific and limited areas of research when it comes to the cannabis and the hemp plant because there's just not endless funding and only certain scientists are actually looking to study this. It's not widespread as of yet. It's still not in required medical curriculum. Learning about the endocannabinoid system and how cannabis and hemp interacts with it is still an elective at this point, but we do have tons and tons and tens of thousands of published researched articles to be able to integrate it into health regimens. One of the focused areas of study is regarding IBD and IBS, so irritable bowel syndrome or dysfunction. CBG has been shown to be most effective at all of the cannabinoids at reducing pro-inflammatory enzyme called MPO that is released as part of the inflammatory response. So it's also a viable biomarker that the medical community uses for assessing IBD disease status. Okay. So antibiotics. We need antibiotics, but in dire circumstances. Unfortunately, modern medicine has overprescribed and misused them. And now we have this antibiotic resistance problem happening worldwide. Just look it up. Antibacterial resistance poses one of the greatest risks to global health. As antibiotics become less effective, the treatment of infection becomes a greater challenge within healthcare systems. It is like the same as bacteria. It is just growing out of control, and antibiotics are no longer doing their job because we have so many influential factors that are just causing these situations to grow out of control. Misuse of antibiotics is one of them. So we're still in the early research states, but CBG is showing that it could be one of the most potent cannabinoids against these bacteria that have grown out of control, including the bacteria or antibiotic resistant MRSA, MRSA. Just like CBD has been proven and patented for its neuroprotective properties, CBG has them as well. That prefrontal cortex sits at the very front of your brain, and it governs decision making, problem solving, goal setting, emotional reactions, social behavior. So pretty much that prefrontal cortex controls who you are as a person. It dictates your personality. When the function of this part of your brain is impaired, it starts to age. Aging happens faster than normal, and it allows for conditions like ADHD, attention hyperactive disorder, and PTS, post-traumatic stress, to happen. Also dementia. It opens way for those types of conditions to settle in. Chronic stress, trauma, aging, disease can cause impairment in this brain region, which can cause personality changes that can either be subtle or profound differences in your personality. CBG was discovered to prevent neuronal cell death, reduced inflammatory markers, while improving motor function. So that's a pretty cool ability of CBG to work in this part of the brain that is allowing for these very crippling disorders to kind of take hold. Where we really notice the effects of CBG without tests is very important to understand here, is in mood regulation. We don't need a test to show us that we are more stable in our emotions and our relationships are healthier because we're less anxious and our fuses aren't as short as they were before, or depression and anxiety, hyperactivity, all that neurodivergent stuff isn't as prevalent when CBG is able to interact in that part of the brain. To understand this a little bit better, we need to talk about an endocannabinoid, which endo means within. An endocannabinoid is a cannabinoid that is produced in the body, not from the plant, and anandamide is one of them. It's produced internally and naturally interacts with these cannabinoid receptors that I had mentioned earlier, that are interacting with these chemical messengers to plug in or speak to the receptors in this language that we're talking about right now. These receptors are concentrated in brain cells and spread throughout the entire body. So this language is happening everywhere in the body. Cannabinoids, whether they're produced internally or they're coming from a plant and you're consuming them, are interacting with this messaging system that is spread throughout the brain and your entire body. So when we're comparing to a plant cannabinoid, this anandamide that is produced by the body is closest to THC, which is known as the bliss molecule. It's called this because of its ability to elevate your mood and give you that feel-good feeling. Low levels of anandamide have been linked to increased anxiety, increased depression, and the inability to adequately manage stress. THC is very tricky though. Like I said, hemp has more balanced ratios according to what nature intended in the plant, and cannabis plant has higher ratios of THC, which is more of a man-made breed to give us that high. That's why that is pretty much what you're going to find at a dispensary or provisioning center, because that's what people are reaching for, who are looking for that euphoric sense. They want to get high. They want that buzz, so to speak. So that's why it gets tricky. I'm focusing on the other cannabinoids for right now. Both CBD and CBG have been found to boost our levels of anandamide because they are able to slow down the activity of the enzyme that breaks down anandamide. So if you're sciencey, that enzyme is called FAAH, FA. And when taking CBG, people report elevated mood and focus because it slows down that it slows down the breakdown. One of the biggest reasons people take cannabinoids is to help alleviate pain and the pain caused by inflammation, so to reduce inflammation. And of all of the cannabinoids, CBG and CBD are the most potent at activating the receptors that could help address pain, acute pain, chronic pain, inflammatory pain, nerve pain, because it's activating what's called your TRPV receptors. So in the beginning of this video, I mentioned the cannabinoid receptors that cannabinoids interact with, but they also interact with all these other receptors throughout the body, and the TRPV or TRPV receptors are one of them. All of these beneficial effects from the hemp cannabinoids can only be achieved with whole plant extract. This means that we need to have a full array of cannabinoids and terpenes that come from the plant. Real quick, I should get into this. If you don't know what terpenes are, they are the smells you smell from hemp or cannabis. So that skunky smell when you know somebody's smoking weed, that weed smell is a terpene that you're smelling. And terpenes are not unique to the hemp and the cannabis plant. They are what gives plants and fruits and trees their aromatic compounds that produce that unique scent and flavors as well. So when you smell a lemon without even seeing it, you're like, oh, that's a lemon because you smell the scent of a lemon. Limonene is the terpene that you're smelling. And just like cannabinoids, terpenes interact in your body with incredible benefits themselves while working synergistically as a co-activating agent to enhance the action of these cannabinoids. You cannot split nature and expect it to work as it was intended as a whole. You can't take the individual parts, consume it, and hope that you're going to get these great benefits as though you were taking the whole hemp extract. Pulling out one compound is never going to give you the full benefit of using them all together. Yes, these products that I am talking about right now, these CBG heavily CBG concentrated compounds that I have, they are inclusive of all of the cannabinoids. There's a full array of the cannabinoids, the minor cannabinoids, CBC, CBN, CBD, CBDA, and also terpenes. They're not isolated in any way. It's not an isolate of CBG. It just has higher concentrations of CBG for somebody who may be experiencing ADHD or dementia or one of those other chronic illnesses or pain situations that I mentioned. So sometimes we exhaust the benefits that we can get from the full plant. So we take just a little bit more of one component or another that we know has these great effects for the condition that we're dealing with. Especially if you're using the product over the course of the long term. So somebody who's consuming CBD for a couple years maybe starts to notice a decline in the effects that they're getting from taking this product. switching over to a CBG product may be of more benefit to you. Each product has a broad array of cannabinoids and specific blends of terpenes to enhance immunity, focus, energy. I specifically have different blends of terpenes for immunity to enhance focus or concentration, so your energy levels. If it's something that interests you, let me know, reach out.